Hello and welcome. Let's start with the GenZ protests in Morocco. Anti-government protests continue in the kingdom, which has been on edge for days now. And the death of at least 3 demonstrators has further fueled public outrage. The group leading the demonstrations is GenZ 212. It has called for the government's dismissal. Now, this comes a day after Prime Minister Aziz Akhannouch has made the first public address since the unrest broke out. On Thursday, the Prime Minister described the violent protests as regrettable and said that the government was willing to engage in dialogue and respond to the demands of the protesters. Young Moroccans have been demanding reform to the health and education sectors. Protests have slammed the government for pouring billions into the preparation for the 2030 World Cup, while many schools and hospitals lack funds and remain in a dire state. The kingdom is also set to host the Africa Cup of Nations in December. Recent reports of the deaths of 8 pregnant women at a public hospital in the city of Agadir have further fueled public outrage.
Today we are here to say that the authorities and the government must address this issue responsibly and with seriousness. We no longer have time to waste allowing public services to remain weak or giving priority to the private sector over the public good. We see the state spending money, but it is private interests that profit from it.
The country's health minister has also echoed the concerns of the people. In his speech to Parliament on Wednesday, the health minister said that though several reforms were underway, they were still insufficient to close the sector's gaps. For days now, hundreds of protesters have been rallying across cities, including the capital of Rabat, Casablanca, Marrakesh, and Agadir, to protest against corruption and social inequalities in the country. The group leading the protests has also demanded the release of all demonstrators who were detained in connection with the peaceful protests. Since the protests broke out last week, over 400 people have been arrested. Nearly 300 people, mainly from the security forces, have been injured. As the protests turned violent earlier this week, vehicles and banks were set ablaze, shops were looted, and security forces were attacked. Now, footage released by the security authorities showed clashes in a town near Agadir. In the footage, hundreds of people can be seen attacking security forces station on Wednesday night. GenZ 212 has distanced itself from the violence and vandalism seen in some cities and has urged the demonstrators to remain peaceful. As per eyewitnesses, criminals have been taking advantage of the unrest and indulging in vandalism.
As a resident of Salé, the young people I saw vandalizing and breaking things here in Salé are not linked to the young people who protested on the first day of GenZ 212. To be clear, these are young thugs who came with the intention of vandalizing and have nothing to do with health or education. And the proof is that if you ask any of them, they can't say anything useful.
As clashes intensify and public outrage grows, the situation remains tense in the kingdom. The Prime Minister has vowed to listen to the demands of the angry youth, but he has not been able to convince the demonstrators. Now, for more on this, we have with us Safa Khazraoui, the editor-in-chief at Morocco World News, joining us live from Rabat, Morocco. Welcome to Firstpost Africa.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you for having me today.
Now, the youth-led movement is calling for the government's dismissal, while Prime Minister Aziz Akhannouch is offering dialogue. From your perspective, is this offer of dialogue likely to ease the tensions, or has the government already lost credibility enough with the protesters at this stage?
Thank you. So the government indeed has twice responded to the protests, including yesterday when it reiterated that it's ready to engage in a dialogue to respond to youth. What matters the most here is how you're willing to communicate with people and whether you're capable of addressing this segment of society. Because here, you're talking to youth and not political parties and unions. Everything matters. The way you'll respond to protests and how. So the youth-led movement that actually called for those peaceful protests are a wiser generation. They know what they want. Of course, I'm talking about the youth again that launched a peaceful campaign here and not rioters. So what actually is lacking is follow-ups and
Yes.
not only dialogue, in the sense that people want to see implementations happening and not only words. Take for instance that several mega projects were actually inaugurated in Morocco like frequently, but what's ambiguous is what's next.
Yeah.
Also, similar projects are mostly centered in urban areas. There are some rural areas where like issues are very critical, and even like with initiatives like taking place
Mm.
by the government and are made by the government, they are critically insufficient. So following up on how those launch projects work and how they are
Right.
working, whether hospitals you're launching are really meeting people expectations, whether our local administrations, when a
Mm.
person needs a paper, a simple paper, or a stamp or whatever activity are their demands are, whether those demands are simply met or those are, met with challenges that make people just fed up. So questions mark mostly on communication again. I also want to clarify something because I
Right.
also see often or often see how international media criticizing the country for building stadiums and infrastructure. It's not about infrastructure and not about stadiums. I, as a Moroccan, want for sure to see
Mm.
entertainment as many, entertainment activities happening as many other Moroccans. So seeing Morocco hosting prestigious events like the World Cup and AFCON, of course, it's good. It has benefits for the country and its economy and the people. But here, it's not about this. It's, I mean,
Yes.
how you have to actually implement this, bring us prestigious events. We want
Right.
the World Cup happening. We want the AFCON happening. But this is secondary to priorities key sectors like healthcare and education.
Yes. Right. So priorities. Now,
Yes.
with 3 deaths already reported and these nightly clashes intensifying, you've touched on some of the factors that are driving the escalation of violence. Do you see these protests spreading beyond the Gen Z base to broader society?
Look, protests from generation beyond just Gen Z were already happening. Actually, this movement of Gen Z 212
Yeah.
came in response to protests took place currently or recently, including the one in Agadir, for instance. And one of the latest
Mm.
other protests that took place was just in September from protesters from Al Hawz region, which was affected by the deadly earthquake of September 2023. So Gen Z are conveying
Yes.
their parents' plea, their fellows' plea from different generations. Unemployment is a challenge that Morocco faces. You will be shocked to see how many people are like with highest degrees work in jobs that has nothing to do with their professions, including PhD holders. So this is merely those Gen Z protests are merely an extension to an already ongoing protest, but it only took this dimension
Mm.
because a campaign of violence and riots and vandalism, which unfortunately overshadowed the peaceful protests that sought legitimate rights. So, as for factors, we cannot
Yes.
blame any party here, honestly. I have seen some interpretations either blaming youth for launching peaceful protests or the government or, blame from here and there. Of course, unlawful arrest and use of violence
Yeah.
from both sides are regrettable and something that we feel very, very saddened for. But whatever the factors are here, we're here seeking solutions. Obviously, there is a misunderstandings
Right.
because protests don't mean chaos, and we'll have to be careful how to distinguish between riots and vandalism and peaceful protests that are seeking legitimate rights like good quality education and good healthcare and access to healthcare without any challenges.
Mm. Right. And so now, just finally, the Health Minister has admitted that while reforms are underway, they are still insufficient. But beyond healthcare, what deeper socio-economic and political grievances are perhaps fueling these protests? And in your view, what reforms would be necessary to address the frustrations of Morocco's population?
All right, if you're asking me about my perspective, the question or the answer to this question is very simple. The first reform needed is better communication with people, a better communication to mitigate and address the crisis by using a language that is easy to understand and unambiguous and clear for you're addressing youth again. You're addressing I mean, some protesters are, less than 16, 15. So you can't just like use a language that is very official and very, full of, words as you're talking with unions
Straightforward.
or political parties again. You have to really use a communication method that is addressing that segment you're addressing and talking to. Another thing, in every country, in every,
Right.
across the world, there are dysfunctions unless it's a la la land where everything is perfect. But I think accountability and putting people in charge of any potential corruption, whoever they are, accountable in a transparent way will help a lot in making things better. We're dealing with a serious
Right.
issue here, and that's because our people are losing trust. They no longer trust
Right.
the government and trust their pledges. So technically, we need to see, or the demands that are asked from the Gen Z movement now, and
Yes.
to see tangible results, to see an action taken against anyone, any potential party involved in corruption and dysfunctions in key sectors as such.
Right. And I thank you very much for being with us on First Post
Thank you.
Africa.
Firstpost now available in 9 languages on YouTube. English,
Stands at $36 trillion.
French,
Le FMI, comme
German,
Geschäftsführenden Direktor
Hindi,
$30 trillion kakarjo.
Indonesian,
Pemerintah tanpa pemeriksaan.
Italian,
Sekali radikali.
Japanese,
4 兆ドル以上も
Portuguese,
por causa do próprio balanço patrimonial.
Spanish.
Beautiful bill.
Go to Settings, click on Audio Track and select a language of your choice. Be the first to know what's happening around you in your first language. Firstpost.